Together for a photo. The photographer, I think, really wants to capture this VIP gang. Here we go. And let's put them together. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We have one more panel coming up that is on a topic that I have not seen discussed anywhere else in this conference, but it is a mind-blowing one that will give you something to talk about over cocktails shortly thereafter. There we go. It's our very VIP panel. Thank you so much. Annabelle, you did a splendid job. Splendid. Very good. Okay, no time for just one more. Off with you. On with the next. Pascal, absolument super. Merci. Sandy, thank you so much. All right, Animoca Capital, Lennox. All right, keep an eye out for McLaren and the OKX logo. I promised you a topic that I have not seen discussed anywhere else all week at Hong Kong Fintech Week to close us out today, and here it comes. Open software has delivered platforms that are stable, effective, and cheap for people to use. And the question now is, can we do the same with open finance? Can we harness the power of inclusion, of competition, and openness to create financial platforms that are cheap, effective for the people? And we are going to find out about that now. We are going to start with a discussion that is going to be led by Hakan Eroglu. He is an advisor specifically on open finance, digital currencies, and payments to the BIS Innovation Hub, who have been doing so much to enrich our conference for the past 2 days. Joining him is Esther Mai. She is the Managing Director and Head of Digital Banking, Consumer Experience and Analytics with Standard Chartered Bank, big supporters of Hong Kong Fintech Week. Our only central banker on the panel comes to us from the Saudi Central Bank. He is Khaled Albasias, where he is the Director of Financial Sector Development. And rounding out this panel, we have a hometown hero, Chung Chi-Wai. He is a FinTech Director of Commercial Data Interchange, and again from the HKMA. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Hakan's paddle, and I'm going to turn the stage over to him and the rest of the gang. Hakan, let's do this. Yeah. All right. Good.
So, hello everyone, and good to see so many people coming at the last panel today. I'm really glad to have you here on our topic on open finance and the power of open finance frameworks. So open finance is the next evolution after open banking. So what it means actually is to broaden the scope of asset class and products beyond payments and banking. It includes insurance, pensions, mortgages and lending, and more products. So it's broadening the scopes into data and what you can do with that and building new use cases. So how do we get there? We are talking about frameworks today. So they can be regulated, they can be industry-driven frameworks, there can be hybrid models as well. We are also talking about infrastructure. Is infrastructure centralized or decentralized? So all these questions that are really relevant to form an open finance, an inclusive open finance framework to also increase competition in the market. So very happy to have this esteemed panel here from regulator side, but also from the industry. And let me really start with the first question. I think starting with Your Excellency, Khaled, on the SAMA Open Banking Framework. So the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia decided to implement the Open Banking Framework. So what are your considerations and objectives for such a framework, and how do you achieve those objectives?
Thank you, Hakan, and I would like to thank Hong Kong Fintech Week for their hospitality today and the invitation. We started our journey in Saudi Central Bank in 2019 when we embarked on open banking, who owns the data, and what other activities that fintechs and banks and financial institutions can do with the open bank. So we started in 2019. We came up last year with our open banking framework for account information. And this year we'll come up with the second framework for payment information. So that's where we started. We opened up our sandbox, regulatory sandbox, also last year for fintechs to come and operate. So we had different fintechs doing personal finance management, doing enterprise finance management, infrastructure, alternative credit, really a very progressive and different use cases each and every single fintech is doing, as well as banks. Banks also have leveraged on this framework, and they created their own open banking teams, departments, trying to leverage and monetize and utilize the framework. And the framework is really not just about standards. So we have an API standards where how data is being exchanged between the market participants when it comes to open banking, but also about standardization of a consent management, the privacy, the cybersecurity, the entire controls really end to end. And it's regulatory driven. So all market participants have to comply. So that's really how we see open banking. It's really an opportunity to innovate, create new use cases, leverage on our central bank framework, standardized, regulatory driven. And we've seen really a tremendous amount of market participants, different use cases. And in the payment space, hopefully by the end of this year, we'll have the framework. And we're expecting some use cases when it comes to payment information by early next year. And that also will add to the payment infrastructures we have in place in Saudi Arabia, whether it's a card rail or it's an RTGS payment rails. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Before I move on to Esther, just quickly, is it a centralized or decentralized approach in Saudi Arabia, and give some background why?
Sure. So I think some countries have adopted a centralized approach where they build the APIs and the interfaces in a single entity, legal entity that exchange data between the market participants. We have decided to make it decentralized, where players exchange data between themselves without a central entity in between. And our thinking was more of innovations. If you standardize it and you introduce another player, it will probably reduce the innovations and the ability to exchange new premium APIs, new type of use cases. So we decided that the market participants will exchange data between each other. At least they can apply for the standard API framework, but they're also open for additional use cases that's really outside of the framework.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was very useful, and to get a perspective of a central bank looking after building such a framework. And now we have Esther from Standard Chartered, a global bank present in multiple countries, also with experience in implementing open banking, be it in regulated markets, but also in markets where you build it voluntarily to build some kind of collaboration. So what is your perspective on open banking in terms of how do you leverage that? What is your perspective on it? Do you think a regulated approach is the right one, or is it a market-driven or something in between? Really want to hear your opinion on that.
I think for when it comes to open API, actually it means sharing data in some sense, and I think as we can imagine, for the bigger players, they may be more reserved because they host the vast majority of the data, and they see it as like, if I share the data, how much else can I get it from the other players, right? So if you ask, for our experience, it's more like a hybrid model. Especially we have, two representatives, from central banks, with us today. I think the regulator or the central bank, play a role in terms of putting standards, as what we have talked about, and also, to give the industry some positive push. Because I think especially to begin with, to make the idea of open API viable, in the industry, it's important, that the central bank or the regulator takes a leading role, in terms of establishing the standards, giving some positive push to the industry, so that then people can start to participate. Once they participate, then there will be a use case or business case, that come up. And then eventually, I would expect that when it becomes more mature, then the intervention can be less. Right? So then, because the major players, they can think of ways to broaden the scope or the horizon of the entire landscape.
Yeah, but what do you see in terms of, you say, once they participate, what does it take so that they participate?
Okay. That's then we can ride on the experience of, in particular for Hong Kong, and then maybe I speak first, and then I'll let Chi-Wai supplement that too. It's like, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, has also, issued, guidelines in terms of the framework and standards and roadmap, to foster, open API or open banking, among the banking industry. In that sense, the key players in Hong Kong will then need to participate. There are standards, there are guidelines, and also there is a roadmap, when we need to contribute the data, when we need to share. And I think, it's a fair playing, ground as well, because you can only be consuming the data when you provide the data. So in that sense, I would see that as a healthy kind of push. If I use my own term, it's a positive push, so that then when the data is here, then the participants, then they can choose, which use case they can apply to absorb or to consume those data.
Yeah, thank you very much, Esther. And you talked about the open API framework of the HKMA. I really recall many years back when I was with the private sector in consulting, I was also dealing with the HKMA open API framework. And then it was at the very beginning with defining the phases. Now, after the years, right, that we went through open API, also in Hong Kong with HKMA, which is more like a public-private hybrid model, so to say, right? And maybe for Chi-Wai, to understand how has Hong Kong embraced this open API framework, and what do you see in terms of what are the right use cases to actually, as a next phase, to make open API, let's say, the adoption higher, let's say?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me here. And I just want to echo Esther's question first of all. Don't worry, I'm not from the supervision side. I'm more from the market development or the data development side. So I think we are all fine with the conversation here. So in terms of how Hong Kong MA stands on embracing open data, it's definitely we are more than welcome to encourage banks to open data. And it can be depicted by a major initiative, as you mentioned, Open API, that was launched in 2018 in a phased approach. So right now we are also working on one of the phase on interbank account data sharing as well, which is supposed to have a pilot next year. So another initiative actually I want to draw everyone's attention on it is the commercial data interchange that we have launched since last year. In 2022. We finished the pilot a year ago, which is 2021, and we find some solid use cases on commercial data interchange. I understand this is the last session today, but if you give me 1 minute, I can quickly introduce CDI before we go to a happy hour after that. So CDI basically it's to enable banks to have access to multiple data sources to get commercial data for different use cases. So the infrastructure CDI aims to provide some kind of functions for consent management, for data requests. Most importantly is to allow banks to have a single connection to CDI, which will enable them to access to all data providers that are connected to CDI. So we hope to co-create a data ecosystem together with banks by leveraging a role from the central bank to make this infrastructure. So from these two initiatives, I think I hope this has shown clearly about HKMA stance on embracing the use of open data.
Thank you very much for this. Do you see, so what is the incentive model of the CDI? Can you just elaborate a little bit more? And maybe is there also an angle for, let's say, cross-border collaboration as well? Because especially when it comes to trade finance, I think that's an area that we have realized is widely neglected as well in terms of sharing such information to improve that kind of access to financial services, especially for SMEs from the perspective of financial inclusion. Any perspectives on this?
Yes, definitely. I can give you an example how we are trying to drive financial inclusion. So basically, before we have CDI or before we encourage the use of data, we did some survey to understand the landscape of SME financing for corporate. should they want to expand their business, they may want to apply a SME loan from a bank. But that particularly could end up in like being asked for some collaterals or use a lot of like paper document to support the loan, which could be number one, time consuming, and number two is basically the business may not really have a collateral like a property. 磚頭 is usually one of the collateral that is commonly used over the 10 or 20 years because of the booming market of Hong Kong property market. So the thing is, we see these issues and we want to really rely on something else to judge the legitimacy or the operation of a business. So we try to ask the industry what can be done to have a more better judgment for a business, how well it is running. So we get into an idea to have CDI connecting, for example, some sales data, payment data, and a lot of like other operating data that can prove a business is running well or not in that sense. So traditionally, some business, they may not be able to get a financing using the traditional way. They can be included right now using this new new data infrastructure, CDI, to get what they need to expand their business or to do whatever they want to achieve a better business prospect.
All right, thank you very much for this perspective for the corporates or the SME side. Probably just quickly also for you, Your Excellency, on Sama's approach again. So do you see the role of open banking as well to create a level playing field in the industry, let's say in the space of the payments business or the payments industry? So how do you see that all that comes together? Because we see similar developments in other jurisdictions, in Brazil, for example, where you have the open finance or the open finance regulation with the PICs. Then you have UPI in India. You have multiple initiatives where really real-time payments rails are coming together with open banking. What is your perspective on that one?
Yeah, thank you. I think open banking will really create an additional use cases, whether it's in payments or in account information. So just at the same point my colleague here mentioned, when it comes to small and medium business financing, it's very difficult for these segments to tap into the credit market from traditional financial institutions because they typically look at your audited financials and certain data which many of these businesses really do not and cannot produce in their early stage years. So we've seen the tendency where you can look at their open banking data, look at their payment behavior, average balances, create really an additional credit information that will help lender even improve their credit profile when they look at these small and medium players, rather than just looking at the standalone financial statements or some credit bureau scores. So that's really has helped. On the payment, also, Saudi is quite advanced when it comes to payment. We have our own schema, we have our own RTGS, we have our own instant payments. But open banking does play a role where it creates really additional use cases where you can proactively debit an account, you can do this reoccurring payments over open banking platform. You can even create an additional payment types that uses open banking. As you rightly mentioned, if you look at India and UPI, it's based and built on an open banking framework where you can use even QR codes and an additional payment types to enhance existing payment infrastructure and introduce new payment types. And that also helps when it comes to financial inclusions, whether if you're retail or you're an individual or you're an enterprise, you can tap into this, as I said, innovative new use cases on payment and account informations.
Thank you so much for this. Conscious of time, we have 1.5 minutes left. Just a quick round, I think 30 minutes each. So the classic question, where do you see open finance in 3 years? I mean, we don't know what's happening in 3 years, but probably your feeling in terms of, there are multiple trends, be it AI, be it in, of course, in the blockchain space, DeFi. Maybe things are changing in 3, 4 to 5 years. But do you see still open finance being relevant? And do you see what type of key trends you see in this space, actually?
I would think that so put aside those new futuristic technology.
Exactly, about 3 years.
I think overall, open banking will be crucial, for the entire financial industry, I would say, as a whole. Our theme is on open finance. As a bank, we talk about open banking. But then what I see in 3 years is like it's not bank, to share information among themselves, but then across, the financial institutions like banks, insurance companies, and even payment companies, even fintechs, will be able to create a more healthy ecosystem to explore, and as a whole, the whole industry can then explore new ways how we underwrite, how we access the customers.
Thank you so much. Chi-Wai?
Yeah, I agree with Esther. I think data is not lacking in Hong Kong, but it's just about how we can get them together and how we can make use cases based on the data. Some banks may be able to develop its own data analytic, while some may rely on some third-party solution provider to drill down further with the data provided. But I guess the future is on the use of data, and that's why we are creating a data ecosystem.
Excellent. Your
I
Excellency.
notice we run out of time, but
but please, but we can still wrap up.
So I think financial sector has always been in an advanced stage when it comes to technology, and they're first to adopt data probabilities and accessibility data. And I think other sectors will probably follow in healthcare, in insurance, in asset management, and other classes where it really becomes an open data rather than open finance, where you can access your data, whether it's stored anywhere, and allow third party to access that data, create a useful information for individuals and corporates.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Your Excellency, Chi-Wai, Esther, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you all to joining this panel, the last one of the Hong Kong FinTech Week. Wish you all the best and see you next time. Thanks.
Hakan, an absolutely marvelous job. Well done. Thank you to Hakan, Esther, Chung, Chi-Wai, and Khaled. Well done, you guys. Absolutely marvelous. Thank you very much. Your duty is done. You've earned a drink. Look forward to seeing you in a bar in Wan Chai, which, doesn't need to be as bad as it sounds. Would you like to do a picture while I wrap up? Please do. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank all of you for coming here for the past 2 days. I know that you are going to take what you have learned. You are going to go forth and continue working to create a financial system that is more inclusive, more robust,